Hey guys. By the way, just to mention, you guys are on mute, and it's quite silent here.
Have you mute or unmute?
I think now we're unmuted. So we will start maybe in 2 minutes, just to let more people to join. Yeah, for waiting.
Sounds good.
Okay, so maybe we can get started. Yeah, thank you all again for coming to Random Samples today. Today is my pleasure to have Eshwar from our team to present. Eshwar is a senior machine learning engineer at the Red Hat AI innovation team. He works on many different topics, including synthetic data generation, agent system, and reinforcement learning for language model fine-tuning. Before he joined our team, he finished his master's degree from USC, University of Southern California. Back then, he worked on auto improvement loops for deep learning models through reinforcement learning. Today, he's going to talk about a closer look at the reinforcement learning verifiable reward through the lens of reasoning strategies. We all know for reinforcement learning, having diverse rollout is very important. Otherwise, you don't have much reward signal to fine-tune the model. And today he's going to give us some like an overview and some research discovery he recently got a specific on how we analyzed reinforcement learning verifiable reward, how it reshapes reasoning diversity in mathematical models. So without further ado, please take it away.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you for the introduction. I think I'll give a very good overview of the reinforcement learning with verifiable rewards. I think just to introduce for people that may not be aware of the latest settings of how RL is used for language models, especially in domains like mathematics, where answer verification is quite robust and definable. Usually we use a binary reward as just the final answer being correct or incorrect, which is a very simple setting. And in that way, this is a simple overview of you have a question, you roll out multiple samples for the same questions, which is nothing but multiple attempts at the same question from the model with a temperature, usually 1.0 or even a higher temperature. And you're looking for verification on that. And advantages, this formula might look very familiar for people from statistics as well. There's just a z-score, which tells you how one sample is advantages or outlying compared to the peers in the same group. And that formula, if you look at it closely, you will know that if every sample succeeds, then no one is better than anyone else. And if all samples fail, it's the same case. So you really want a mix of things, which is already pointing to the need for something like diversity. But yeah, and so there's some background. This study of diversity or the need for it is not entirely novel. A lot of work has been done at looking at how the reasoning space behaves through the training steps, especially in the settings of a non-dense reward like a sparse reward setting with the RLVR. And this was one of the New Rips 2025 papers, which was very pivotal in our understanding of how they posit that from the base model, you don't really gain much through RLVR in terms of new solutions, because even the base policy, when you give it multiple attempts, a large number of attempts, in this graph we can see at 256 attempts, the base model actually can solve the same number, or if not more, number of questions as a RL trained policy that is well into its training life cycle. And on the left, we can see a little bit of an illustration of this very conceptual illustration of what might be happening that leads to this pass at k behavior, where we see that RL trained models taper off at high pass at k. They hypothesize that there are reasoning paths that lead to correct answers more often than not, and they are sharpened by that distribution. In the probability distribution, they gain more weightage, which inherently means that there are other paths that are suppressed, which may be observed as some other questions that are harder, that may not be solvable, for an RL trained model. And this was from our studies where it's kind of a simpler look at what may be happening, which is very similar to what we saw in the last slide. But base model usually is very unsharpened, as in it is not going to be a collective model. A base model is usually able to solve some questions sometimes, but tries a broad range of strategies, and more often than not, it fails. Through training, we expect some of these correct modes to be more sampled. A sharpened policy would allocate more weight for the correctness, and that is the intention. But what we can see here is that there are some other reward zones or strategies that are missed during this process. And what you would ideally like is to preserve all of these modes. I think a lot of the RL literature has already talked about this mode covering phenomenon that you would be really looking for in RL algorithms. Ideally, you would want high coverage, but also you don't want to be allocating weight to the non-correct space of the probability distribution. So that we know that is the concept of diversity, but why does diversity matter for, let's say, models in general? Why would you want to do that? As the world moves towards agents and a lot of applied models of that are RL trained, there has been a great increase in works regarding test time scaling, inference time scaling. Even within our team, we have a lot of research that has been done on this topic. One thing that naturally shows up is that during inference time scaling, you would want samples that are diverse in order to really extract value from rolling out multiple samples. In this, there are test time approaches to diversity boosting, such as looking at samples that are diverse from each other and only keeping those, or going in allocating more budget to methods that boost diversity. But what would be but the other angle to it is that if your training algorithm itself is diversity preserving, then you end up with a model that behaves well under repeated. And the other side of why diversity matters is that we're reusing here the advantage formula, as we saw that if all samples get a reward of 1, you get no advantage signal. So there's no differentiator, there's no way to calculate and backpropagate on that. And if no samples are able to solve a problem, that's also the same case. And in that context, in our studies, this was one of our preliminary studies where we saw that is there a correlation between how many strategies or how many different reasoning paths are required to solve hard problems versus easy problems. And it naturally shows across data sets that the harder subsets here, by harder, we did a median split. We sort problems by their pass rate, and everything to the everything lower than the higher than the median is considered easy. Everything that has a lower pass rate than the median is hard. And we see that on the harder subset, genuinely more and broader strategies are needed to even solve them once. And the insight here is that, and those are the hard problems that you would want to solve during training. And those are the ones that are going to be reward rich, because their advantage calculation would actually break down into either 1 or 2 samples having a relatively high advantage compared to the others. And those are exactly the samples that you're leaving behind when you're doing uniform sampling or any diversity unaware method of RLVR. And the second kind of insight is that this may not be immediately obvious if you only look at PASET K metrics, such as PASET 1 and PASET 64, because many solutions, many problems can be solved with just 1 or 2 strategies, and this is often the case. That as soon as a few good solutions are found, models kind of seek those modes in the distribution. They go towards that, and they're able to solve and get reward for many of the problems. But the trade-off here is that you're leaving behind some of the harder and genuinely creative problems behind by this kind of greedy behavior of seeking the good modes.
Can I ask you a question about the previous plots? Like in the ARM, do you also have like sample that get like facet k equal to 0, or you filter them?
We filter them. This is they at least
So lower than the median, but at least
yeah, at least one. And the maximum here was 64 rollouts per problem.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And this is this is one of our hypotheses as to this, kind of going back to what we already know from different works, but can we measure that? And there have been different ways to measure this in terms of coarse grained metrics like facet K, or looking at token level entropy. But can we observe this and define that? How does that look, and why does it happen? And that was one of our first probes in this research work. And the second one is that if it is true, can we measure it? Are the current metrics useful enough? And if not, what can we do about that? This was an experiment that we did very early on, where we looked at this came out of a surprise of how token entropy was rising through the training steps when we were implementing a DAPO baseline. DAPO is one of improved GRPO algorithms, which is very popular in terms of RLVR, especially for the math domain. And one of the algorithms highlights is a boost in token entropy in the hopes of preserving diversity in the model. The surprising thing here was that for this experiment, we use an open LLM judge. We use an expert model to categorize rollouts into different mathematical strategies. And when we look at the number of strategies that a model uses on average through its training life cycle, we see that it continuously decays, regardless of its token entropy rising, which is not obvious result, because one could expect that the token entropy rising would generally preserve diversity even in the research space, but that wasn't the case when we studied this. That kind of gave us an immediate insight onto this is happening regardless of if you're boosting token level entropy. So and is there a way to measure this then that is not token entropy? This is a
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So for the previous for this figure, do you have any intuition, maybe some examples you observe where this token level entropy is increasing, but the other the token level entropy is increasing, but the strategy level diversity is increasing? What is your intuition, why this happens?
Right. I think we did a study specifically on a subset of problems that had a drastic decrease in strategies. I'm not sure if we've included the figures here, but there what we found out, also Oleg, one of our teammates, helped me with that, which was that the strategies, the token level entropy usually, the way we studied that was we take a sequence, we take the midpoint of the sequence, only the first half of the tokens and the second half of the tokens, and saw if the entropy distribution was different in those. And what we found out was that the first half is always quite certain, and the second half was where most of the entropy was carried by. And that gave us an insight that probably the strategy decision is being made at a stage where most of the certainty is happening. And that's where the strategy probe here is only sensitive with that part, because as soon as you decide which method of mathematics you're going to use to solve that, you're already certain there. But then this increase in token level entropy comes from you applying the same strategy, but still putting it differently. At least that's but we haven't done more into more fine-grained levels, maybe to the quadrants and see how that looks, but that's kind of the intuition.
Yeah, I can also just give some context as well. I think, as Eshwar said, we didn't do like a very thorough study, but what we did see is I think between GRPO and DAPO, there was a difference in which one actually gained more entropy. So it seemed like something to do with the DAPO training objective allowed it to have a little bit more entropy per token on like the rollouts overall. But primarily the like entropy decrease was on in the very beginning of the token, sorry, in the very beginning of the sequence, there would be a few words that are very common across problems in math. So like for a, like you could have, for example, or like suppose, or these kinds of phrases is where we saw the main difference in entropy, and then everything else was kind of the same.
Yeah, and I think the DAPO objective kind of, I think looking at it would make perfect sense as well, because they do clip higher and that allows for entropy to kind of bounce around a bit more than your regular PPO clip objective for that is used in GRP as well. Thanks, Oleg, for sharing that. So this one is kind of taking a closer look. It's a scattered plot between entropy and performance. Performance is now here shown as two parts. One is passage 1 and passage 64 on different problems. And this is across different RL algorithms. What we see here is that you can have methods that reduce entropy from the base policy and achieve higher passage 1 and passage 64. But you can also have algorithms that increase token entropy and have higher passage 1 and passage 64. The dynamics of this is these can be explained by looking at specific algorithms themselves, but what they show is that the fact that entropy is not a perfect diagnostic for the type of diversity that you may be interested in, which is to say that the reasoning strategies or the different mathematical strategies that a model can take to solve a given question, that is not exactly what is being measured by looking at token entropy. And this led to us trying to see, we've been able to observe the phenomenon. We've been able to hypothesize why that might happen, but we haven't been really able to measure it. And relying on token entropy, at least the way it is usually measured, was not helpful enough. Maybe doing it as we discussed in doing sections of the rollout and measuring entropy over that, or maybe the direction of entropy, as in is it increasing, decreasing, than overall sequence level entropy may give us better signals. But we needed a measure that was directly looking at what is happening at the trajectory level.
So yeah, in the previous, so what like the performance. So this is like the performance before training and after training.
Base
passage 1, passage 64.
Yes, yeah.
And then on the x-axis you show the token entropy.
Yeah.
And what are you showing here exactly?
This is to so there have been, for example, the DAPO research claims that their performance gains comes from boosting entropy. But that may not exactly, if that was the case, then there should be, it's not a one-to-one correlation.
So the surrogate entropy goes from like 18 to 28, to 0.18, 0.28, and they claim that is the reason.
Yes, that is one of their primary objectives of, but they also have 3 different things acting on the DAPO. So it is hard to decompose exactly what is happening there. And it would be interesting actually to see where DAPO lies in the reasoning strategy space. We'll get to that. But this was mostly to for our analysis that can we use entropy as a predictive or like a diagnostic metric of anything like passage 1 or passage 64. Maybe if it's a diverse model, you would expect passage 64 to be higher. Well, that's not exactly the case. You can have lower entropy and still maintain a higher passage 64 than the base model. Maybe at passage, maybe at like very high passage rates, maybe they converge.
And this token entropy you compute for each token in the sequence, you compute like the entropy, and then you average over.
Yes.
You average or you sum over the sequence.
We average.
You average over the whole sequence. Okay.
So what we propose in our work is this is a very natural metric. Many of us would probably know what F1 is, but looking at this as a trade-off of looking at the behavior of models as a trade-off between mode covering and mode sharpening behaviors, it becomes simple to want to use, and we already know something like that, which is exactly what recall and precision is in retrieval systems, and that's what it is in classification systems. Specifically, on the right side, there already was a work that was done in the distillation literature, and this was their analysis of why exactly distillation works in generative models, and they explained it as a they explained it as a problem of the student model trying to fit itself onto the distribution of a teacher model, and they break it into components where they call the modes in the teacher's distribution as the components, as shown the black kind of circles on the right side, and the red x's or x marks are the median of each or the centroid of each of those modes. And they describe the process as the student model's capability to fit itself and project itself onto the teacher model's distribution is what leads or directly dictates its capability to distill better or worse there. Right? And we borrow some of that idea as to that's exactly what an RL training algorithm is intending to do. An RL policy is trying to approximate the ground truth distribution in that way. And the ground truth distribution may also have different modes. Here, these are the correct modes, or the reward rich. And here we can see that, well, we wouldn't want to be missing any of these reward, but we also don't want to be wasting the mass on the zones between them. So in that way, we felt it was natural to decompose this into, well, what if we just measure F1 in the strategy space, and coverage being how many strategies you keep. And so out of, let's say, 20 correct strategies, here we show 19 correct strategies, how many are you able to recall during test time under any problem? And this is a common notion of so here the formula breaks down into S model is the strategy set of an RL model, and S base is the strategy set of the base model over the strategy set of the base. So this the denominator being the strategy set of the base is grounded in the fact from our second slide that the base models usually have inherently access to all of the different strategies, but they're just not sharp enough to show them in lower rollout rates. So here for the S base, we use 256 rollouts. In some studies, we did 1024 rollouts to get a good coverage of what the base model is capable of, and we make that as the universal set. And the strategy set of a model is simply calculated over 64 rollouts. And
the strategy in base are all this available strategy, or all the available strategy provide at least the one correct?
All the available strategies provided that the CS1 is correct. Okay. It was used to solve a problem once, yeah. And then moving on to sharpness, this is the kind of analog to precision in retrieval systems. Here, what exactly we're being precise about is that the model should, how much of the weight is it putting in the correct strategy? Even the base model has access to all the reasoning paths needed to solve problems, but its problem is usually not being able to pick the right one at the right question, and not being able to pick the right one more often than the incorrect ones. So this measures that behavior of how many times am I able to recall not just recall, select the correct strategy given a problem and use it to solve it. So here we measure sharpness as number of rollouts allocated towards viable strategies given a problem. This is a VFP function. VFP is defined as any strategy, the set of strategies that were used at least once to solve this specific problem P. And so we know that this strategy is viable for this mathematical problem. How many of that am I able to put weight in is what shown as measures here. I think this is basically our setup for how we did the evaluation and the classification. Training was common across all of the 5 different RL methods that we tested. Our base model was a very popular one for research in math domain, which is Quen25 Math 7B. We tested different RL policies, some with uniform sampling, some with dynamic sampling, namely double, some with adaptive sampling. These were quite interesting because they dedicated rollouts to harder problems, and we saw that harder problems also demand more strategies. So in some way, these algorithms are indirectly allocating more weight to a diverse set of strategies simply by asking about the hard problem. So we'll see the decomposition of how they look in the coverage sharpness space. Going a little bit over the classification of how we assign strategies to rollouts. Here we use 64 rollouts from each of the models per problem. So it would be 64 times 30 for any for any data set, which would be around 2000 rollouts. And then we have so we came up with a 20 strategy taxonomy. This was exactly based on the Amy's published syllabus. They have they published a diverse set of methods that are covered and are exactly tested in the Amy competition math. And we take that and we apply that as the 20 different strategies. It actually breaks down into 20. Each of the 20 sections have some sub methods in them. But for this study, we had to keep, we decided to keep it at the course level of 20. And so we use an expert LLM judge. In our study, we used GPT 5.4 with medium reasoning as the judge that would take rollouts and assign of which strategy was used per problem. And then we calculate sharpness and coverage with the value formula that we discussed. Here, one caveat is that we are forcing one strategy allocation per problem, which may not exactly be accurate in difficult problems where you may have to mix multiple strategies together. But in our study for controlling the variables and also for time's sake, we had kept it this, but we intend to do studies with multi-strategy per problem as well. Sorry, skipped. Yeah. These were our main results. I think we decided to report Amy 24 and 25, but we also have results from the training data. Quickly kind of discussing the results section here. Our data as an algorithm stands out in our empirical results, and we see a sharp correlation between F1 and between F1 and the balance of passive 1 and passive 64. We note that there are no pairs of models where a model A has a higher passive 1 and higher passive 64 and has a lower F1, which kind of is the intent of the strategy metric F1. It is supposed to give a diagnostic view of, or at least a selection view of, if I have a set of different RL models to choose from, I could simply look at F1 and know that it is doing something good. If it has a higher F1 than the other model, either it is getting a good balance between passive 1 and passive 64, or it's winning handily in one of the other one of those metrics. And this is even though it is not being directly calculated with passive 1 and passive 64, this is simply a correlation because F1 is derived from the coverage and sharpness therein. This is a view that we tried to see where exactly the points lie. I think this is derivable from the table, but it gives a better view to look at. If you divide the space into 4 quadrants, this is simply like very close to what we already are aware of, which is low precision, low recall, that kind of combinations. We see that some of the methods are winning in different areas. The R-ADA algorithm is winning in both angles in this study. That also translates directly to its pass rates, especially like averaged across both data sets. And DPO is quite sharp, and GRPO is lying very close by, and we see the knapsack RL and Griso. And we see notably that all of the adaptive sampling, dynamics sampling algorithms, such as Griso, knapsack, and RADA, are notably lying in higher coverage areas than the ones that are uniform sampling. DAPO is it is still uniform sampling, but it scales up samples until damage is calculable per question. So even though it is scaling up samples, it's still a uniform sampler in its algorithm, which explains why its coverage remains low, but its sharpness goes higher than GRPO, than vanilla GRPO. This is a heat map, which kind of this is a evidence section that we decided to plot. To kind of revisit the fact that we hypothesized the mechanism of why some strategies are ruined through RLVR with binary rewards. And that was, well, if a strategy is rare to begin with under the base policy, it will get lesser and lesser rewards and get proved out. That was the hypothesis. And here we see that that exact thing on average. The strategies that had less weight to begin with are the ones that are most commonly proven strategies. For example, trigonometric identities already had very low heat, and representation under the base policy is completely lost by 4 different RL algorithms. Some of the other ones are geometric transformations or transforms is also lost. Notably, the 2 algorithms that maintain this is the adaptive sampling ones, R-ADA and knapsack. Knapsack is, to simply put, an algorithm that has a limited budget of rollouts, and it has to smartly allocate them. I think I may not be doing full justice to full algorithm, but I think that's the gist. And the adaptive sampling ones retain more of the lesser represented strategies, and we also see that the less represented ones are. This brings us to the importance of, we would want to maintain these strategies, because for mathematics, this may be a simple question of, am I able to solve one question or the other? But if in terms of creative solutions or applying it to open-ended questions, we would ideally want to retain the diversity of the base policy, even through RL training. This is kind of a closer look at a single problem. So we looked at the numbers, we looked at everything in aggregates, but how exactly does it play out in a single question? How does this look? On what exactly is happening? So if we take, this is a kind of an exemplary problem from the AIME 2024 set. This is problem 28. And the base here is actually only using 3 different, I think there's a sliver of a 4th model, a 4th strategy, the green strategy somewhere in there. But it applies these, but solves only 1 out of 64 times. And GRPO solves it 9 over 64 times and uses the same 3 strategies that the base used. DAPO uses 4 and still is not able to solve it handily. And then come the adaptive sampling algorithms, and especially RADA is maintaining. We can see that some of the other methods are maintaining 4, 5, and 6 strategies on this problem.
So in this figure, it looks like some strategies they only appear in the
Mhm.
RL trained model, like let's say like GRE, SO,
Yeah.
like there's a green method. Is it like a like always the or not always the like how like why the RL method can appear a new approach which the base model
The-
never.
I think that's a good question. So the thing to note, two things to note here would be that this data set is on the evaluation set. So during training, if the same problem appeared, maybe this wouldn't exactly be the case. But secondly, I think even though on specific problems, different RL methods are able to elicit new strategies. What remains true is that on the corpus, the base model uses 19 strategies and no other method elicits a new strategy on the corpus level. And this remains true even across the math data sets, AMI 24, 25, and math 500, which shows that at the level of the domain, the RL strategies are not really inventing, but they are getting creative in where to apply that. And they're able to select even under different questions. But it would be interesting to see if the same question appeared in the training set. Is it now applying a new method that it could not as a base model? That would be a study that I don't think we ever did that, but that is a pretty good question.
And in this plot, like so it's always the LLM as a judge that tells you
Yeah.
the clustering. Because look, for example, our ADA, this would be like the model that is working the best, right? In terms of like F1
Yeah.
using your method with coverage and sharpness. And there are like 47 out of 64 that are correct.
Yes.
But this also means that it's true, there is more, maybe there are more strategies, but also if you look at synthetic geometry,
Yeah.
the blue light, the dark blue becomes more like the preponderance of the single strategy that was also the most common before.
Yes. Yeah.
Increases, right?
Yeah. And
Like the improvement is not only for diversity.
Yes, that is very correct, and that's kind of the importance of sharpness. We cannot omit sharpness being our kind of not just in our sharpness definition, we condition on the fact that it has to allocate to the bias strategies and it has to execute them. As in, it has to get correct to get sharpness points, which means that, as you said, even though base model applies the same strategy as the best model, practically, it does not really end up solving the same number of questions. So it clearly shows that, well, you can select the correct strategy and still completely fail to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And you can actually not retain any strategies and still be able to solve quite a bit. For example, GRPO, it probably solved most of the problems with just one strategy. And this goes back to the fact that there are few good modes that, and sharpening on those alone will get you far enough in terms of Facet 1 and Facet 64.
True. But also if you look, for example, like NAPS of RL and our area, they're like the same now, at least if with the colors. So there's 5 different colors, right?
Yeah.
So 5 different strategies, but there is a huge difference in correctness.
Yes.
So it's like it's interesting.
Yeah, and also the fact that they retain access to some of these strategies, but it's not true that they do it in the same frequency. RADA generally does more strategy, like on average it tries different ones. Knapsack somehow keeps them, but it's not really allocating that much weight to them. They're all like small pieces of the pie. And as you said, diversity alone doesn't get you that success, and kind of vice versa. Which we think was kind of our hope with the F1, that you cannot omit sharpness out of the table, and you cannot omit coverage. You kind of can if you're only looking at Facet 1 and Facet 64, but diversity would be important for the before mentioned reasons, and kind of looking at, there are some questions that are only solvable through some of the narrow strategies, and those are the ones that you may be getting. This is kind of a I'd say that slide. It's just showing that when you look at this holds that our judge was reasonable in assigning different strategies to different rollouts. I'm not the best expert to say if this is valid exactly, but we eyeballed quite a few samples, and this was to kind of get the fidelity of our judge set up to see that if the assignment was making sense. And finally, the limitations of our study. So this was I would say, a limited form of study. We should extend this, and we intend to extend this to other base models, so that we can see if the algorithms themselves are behaving the same way under different policies, or is that a combination of the base model plus the algorithm plus the data set, like which exactly is contributing to these behaviors. And we also did this only on the math domain. Some other domains that would elicit nice reasoning diversity would be things like coding, like competition coding, could be things like to solve the same coding problem, you could take different approaches. And that is a domain that we're looking into. And judge calibration is one of, I would say, our next immediate steps, which is to make sure that the judge is calibrated and it's so consistent that given the same rollouts, is a judge giving the same set of the same assignment more often than not. If that's not the case, then some of our results are not good enough. So we did some initial studies, but we would like to do this under different judges to see that the rollouts generally end up in the same strategy as assignment across judges. And the fact that we're forcing one strategy assignment per problem is also a bit coarse-grained. It would be better if we would be able to detect composition of reasoning paths taken to arrive at the answer and see if those are also diverse or behave in the same way. And the third one is that if you were to use this setup yourself, this is costly in the terms that you would have to assign every rollout a label, and that is a taxonomy or a judge label that is coming from a judge. We used an expert OpenAI model, so that would be a kind of inadmissible cost for like production systems if you were to be choosing models based on this. So on that way, we were looking, and we have some studies on cheaper proxies that may not be as precise as an LLM judge, but we can use things like cosine similarity or dissimilarity therein to measure some of the diversity there, or doing it by, as we talked about, different sections of the sequence to see if there exists a difference in the strategies. And some of the methods that, so the last point is that these methods are highly variant. The reason we use 64 or 256 and in some cases 1024 rollouts to the base is to control the variance, because these are generally coarse-grained attempts, especially in a setting like 30 questions on any math. It becomes hard to estimate or get a correct estimation without having a bunch of rollouts. So methods that would be able to estimate this diversity under a limited number of rollouts, such as 16 or 8, would enable kind of using this during training in a lot of training loops. So we're looking into what would be a stable method that can do that. That's I think most of what I had. This is just a takeaway of a refresher of what we went through, that token entropy may not always be a reliable diagnostic for the level of diversity that you are looking for. It depends on what domain it is and what kind of setting you're looking at. But for this study, though, we didn't find it to be as reliable. And we motivated that test time scaling gains from diverse sampling, and a lot of production systems are moving towards test time scaling, especially agentic systems. So it would be helpful to have diverse models behind the scenes. And we kind of went through the mechanism of how this pruning of reasoning strategies happen. and we went through the different algorithms and different types of sampling algorithms that can help this. And we contribute this metric to be able to study if you're maybe designing a new training algorithm, or if your intention is to boost diversity, maybe you can take a similar lens and see how it performs and what are your gains and where you lie in coverage and sharpness. Thank you.
So any question from the screen? So I have a question before. So here you show different strategy level diversity. But I think eventually for RLVR, the goal is the rollout you get have different rewards, right? If you have all correct rollouts or all incorrect rollouts, you don't have any reward for updating the model. So I wonder, did you observe for different strategies, they have different success rate?
Great. I think that is a very good question. This was post after our EMLP submission. We did some dissection, and I don't remember exactly the numbers, but there exists quite a big spread on the learnable frontier, which we defined as the problems that get a mix in the rollouts of a reward mix. And GRPO was the lowest, which was unsurprising. A good spread. I can share those numbers maybe later, but we did see a mix. To say that does coverage here directly correlate with this? That is inconclusive, I would say, because it is a mix of being able to do different strategies and being able to execute them correctly. If you were just diverse and not able to execute and get the reward for the solution, you're still not getting learning signal. So maybe directly correlating with F1 maybe the way there, but there is a good spread of the different sampling algorithms. This was all done at the latest step, like step 440. The test was, if I were to continue training at this point on the same training set, how many samples am I learning from? And GRPO had the lowest samples it was learning from, even though it was not anywhere close to higher passive one.
I see. So I wonder, maybe I guess my follow-up question or maybe a related question would be, that was because in my mind, an implication of your method would be, you can control different different strategies to create diversity in rewards. Let's say you are allowed to roll out 64 different trajectories, but in the first 32, everything is incorrect. So in order to update the model on this specific, let's say just one single training example. So in order to use it to update your model, you need your next 32 trajectories to have at least one single trajectory to give you a correct answer. So now one thing you can do is in the prompt level, you specifically instruct the model to try one specific strategy, which you know a priori will be more likely to give the correct answer. Right. So I wonder, in this specific application, anything you can say, like for example, maybe just observing different strategy success rate using base model with IPS inference and scaling, you can compute the success rate beforehand and then choose the most promising strategy in the example I give, or maybe other strategy you have thought about.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a very good question and also very good thought. I think during our experiments, George also had a very good insight that we did we did see this fact that that there are problems that demand a broader set of strategies to be tried in order to be successful. This kind of shows us that so there's one angle of which strategies are more applicable or more likely to solve this question, and that is a study that we can do before we even start training. And there's another one that we can do, which is which are the problems that I know that I should be looking at or allocating more or doing some of these diversity boosting during training before I even begin training. And we roughly see that it's the harder set, but this is still, there are some data sets where it's close, like 1.5 to 1.9. So maybe there are specific questions or problems in the data set that you can you can select beforehand that I need to be treating these specially. And a lot of the curriculum methods do this in indirectly. They do this without a lot of the research that we've gone through in curriculum learning. They do this indirectly without being aware that that's exactly what is happening underneath. But they allocate more, and we exactly saw that some of the adaptive strategies, many of them are allocating more. Their setup is in a way that the budget is directly proportional to their pass rates, to the inverse of pass rate. So harder questions get more samples. But why? What exactly are you intending? What exactly is happening there is potentially that you're going through temperature sampling and finding different strategies. Does this fit? No, throw it out, and so on. So being aware of the fact that, well, different strategies could specifically targeting and injecting different strategies in the could get you there without having to roll out like 1,000 samples could be an algorithm in itself that we can look at.
I have a question about so in this group when you compute coverage, you mentioned that let's say you you only consider strategy that provide at least one correct outcome. This means that your coverage, like higher coverage, it's always better in this setup. But for example, if you have like let's say that you have a retrieval system, you have 100 hits, but only 50 are correct. That system, you would like the system to have like 50% coverage in this case, right?
Technically, you would calculate that over if how many were ground truth were correct, how many did I retrieve. It wouldn't have any bearing on if I retrieved 200, but I captured all 50 correct, I would still get full coverage or like full recall.
Yes, but my point here is that because you filter like strategies that don't provide you like in a way more diversity. Like if you measure more diversity as coverage, here it's always better. But let's say that you have a problem, you sample 64 times, and each of these times you have a different strategy.
Right.
The model is never able to like typically when the model is using a lot of strategy is because it's very confused.
Right.
So most probably all this there will be a lot of diversity, but zero correctness.
Yes.
And all these situations I think are kind of like filter out.
Right.
Automatically, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly why we condition on it being correct. You cannot get rewarded for like that would break down in as you said in the base model settings. Like, oh, that's a model that just tries everything, and that should not get or that should not be measured as a good signal. You're right. So when we measure it, we are looking for but we know that these strategies are able to solve some problem in this corpus. So we keep them as, well, you should be able to access this at some point. And specifically, I think because as putting it in the context of how asked that, there are strategies that our model uses that was never used on this specific problem. So this kind of is the reason that we do it at the corpus level, that there are strategies that could have worked once, that gives us the signal that it is viable on this domain.
Yeah.
But we cannot say confidently with just the base model that this is all that's possible to use to solve this problem. We only can say, at least from our empirical study, we can only confidently say that for this domain or for this corpus, these strategies. For this question, I cannot tell you that this strategy is viable until I see this spread. And so that's kind of why we keep the coverage at the corpus level, and we also skip all the strategies that don't solve at least one question.
That's it, interesting. And another question, like, I think should be again the plot, so you show like the entropy and the training steps, like early on, right?
Oh yeah, this one.
This one.
Yeah.
No, yeah, this one. So what's the takeaway here? I didn't, I don't like what should I learn from this plot?
Yeah, I think the like insight here is that with entropy rising, one could misread that if you only had entropy to look at, like you didn't have the kind of the you could misread this as the model is we misread this as a couple things. One is entropy is rising quite drastically. This could be a mistake in training. And two, if it is meant to boost, like this is double, which is meant to boost, then you could mistake this as there is going to be diversity in the model. And which is true in some cases. There is token level diversity. There is usage of different tokens.
But non-strategy.
Not in the
And this number of distinct strategies, again, it's when you have pass at one, when you have like pass at k equal to 1, do you filter like situations where like pass at k is equal to 0?
Yes. So here the caveat is that so the number of distinct strategies per question that was solved, but even the strategies that didn't lead to correctness is counted here. So basically, I have to go through multiple strategies to solve at least once. So this is why you see very high numbers like 14 and 20 or so in this graph. Which is not what we end up seeing later, which is like the mean strategies that are able to solve the question is lying somewhere around. Where was that? Like this is kind of the numbers you should be looking at if you're only looking at usable or solvable. I can solve this question with any strategy. This is showing that.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Just my only point about this plot would be like I understand that you compute like the average, but during the training steps, probably the sequences are like becoming longer or shorter, or something is happening, right? So I think it's a little difficult to exactly understand what's happening here. But I mean, I'm not saying
Right.
this is not
especially for
informative,
entropy.
because you're not. This is not a snapshot. Like the
yes.
number that you're like after 100 steps and the number that you're at 350 steps. These are different models, right?
Yes. Yeah.
They could have very different dynamics.
Yes. This was to show that through training, you're indeed sharpening on the space, which explains that you're getting more scores. So you're not scatter shooting attempts. But if with the rising entropy, at least like sequence level entropy, it's hard to get the idea that why am I gaining accuracy while my uncertainty is rising. That is at least for us it was non-obvious, but it becomes a little bit obvious when you look at it is indeed doing a selection process with the rewards being allocated to the correct strategies. We had a different breakdown that I might have removed, where we saw that the correct strategies kind of remain constant, okay? And the bad strategies, like unviable strategies, are constantly put away, which is exactly what you would expect from training. The fruit of training.
Cheers.
This kind of golden curve is a composite curve, so it doesn't tell the full story of if I'm losing strategy, how am I gaining accuracy?
So basically, people were claiming that more you train, the more your performance increases, and people were claiming this because the entropy is going up.
Yes.
What you are claiming is that maybe the entropy is going up, but it's also that the strategy is going down.
Yes.
So that's like all the strategies that don't provide gains are pruned.
Yes, and that is
for DAPO at least.
Yes. Yeah. This was the only kind of trajectory level study we did, which was kind of easy enough to see because it had this interesting nature of entropy. Because if we take a vanilla GRTO training, you'd see entropy saying decaying kind of through training, which makes perfect sense. The model's becoming more certain. It's giving me consistent answers. It gets more accuracy. It's perfect. When you deliberately boost entropy through 3 or 4 mechanisms and numbers, you get this kind of a conflicting. I wouldn't say conflicting. Entropy is still very useful to measure what if measures. But
You average over the full group here.
yes.
Compute entropy, you do the average per sequence, and then you average over the group.
Average over the group. Sure, the tokens on the yes.
Yeah, if there's no more question, we can thank the speaker again. Okay, I think we're going to end here. For people who joined either in person or over Google Meet. Thanks again for coming.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.